Hello, it's Becky. Today I'm going to do a Christmas video. Well, it is December after all, and you know there's going to be at least one, but probably a few more Christmas videos this month. So today's one's going to be a little interesting. I'm not going to be doing this video alone. Now, when I say that, I mean that there is another YouTuber who is going to be painting as well, and I have linked all of her information in the video description below. She is releasing her video at the same time as me. Her name is Miranda Watson, and she does all sorts of fun videos like opening subscription boxes. She has heaps of those, so if you're a big fan of subscription boxes, I highly recommend going and checking out her channel. And we thought we would do a collaboration. She lives in Colorado, USA, so she is going to do a winter Christmas, and I live in Melbourne, Australia, so I'm going to do a summer Christmas, and then we will see what our paintings end up like. For this collaboration, we haven't decided on a particular subject other than the broad subjects of winter and summer Christmases, but we are both using the same paper. This is Archer's 300 GSM cold press paper, 100% cotton of course, and it's in a size of 16 by 20 inches, so it's a big one today. 16 by 20 inches is 40.64 by 50.8 centimeters, so you can see it's pretty massive. And we are also going to use our Qor watercolor paints because we both have them. I'm not sure that we have all of the same colors, but I know that we do have a big range of them each. I have all of these ones, which is basically the introductory 12 set, and also the earth colors and the bright colors. Oh, and just as a bonus, I found a little porcelain dish at the op shop. I think it's still got the price tag on for $2, so I'm going to use a Christmas tree mixing pellets today. I've got a big old pot of water here with two sides so that I can have the dirty side and the rinsing side, and I also bought out my good brushes, which I've got in a nice zippy case, so I will just use a selection of these, whatever I feel like at the time. Now, I know this year that Christmas is probably going to be a much stranger time than it usually is, and I know that especially in a lot of parts of the Northern Hemisphere, because you're in winter at the moment, a lot of you guys are in lockdown, and I'm really sorry about that. I know that this winter we really struggled down here. As I've mentioned, Melbourne was in lockdown. It ended up being 3 months of solid stage 4 lockdown with curfews and not leaving our areas for 5 kilometers, and we weren't allowed to visit anyone. It was a really tough time. So I thought that rather than do a conventional Christmas, I would do something that's just a little bit more fun and whimsical. For the first half of my life, I was born and I grew up in New Zealand. And the second half of my life, I have lived in Australia, and I'm a dual citizen of both countries. So I thought today that it would be really fun to think about something in New Zealand. A lot of what happens in Australia and New Zealand is that, yes, we are in summertime, but because of all the history that we have from the European migrants, we do still have a lot of Northern Hemisphere traditions like Christmas trees and all these decorations that we have that are winter related. It's just so weird. It's kind of this hybrid of winter traditions in summertime. More than doing a family Christmas, which is a bit boring, I thought I would do something more interesting and think about one of my favourite beaches that I went to so much when I was growing up. Then I wanted to add in a New Zealand Christmas tree, which is a native Pohutukawa that flowers at Christmas and it looks amazing. So I really wanted to add a Pohutukawa tree and a beach. And then I ended up with this entire drawing here, which you probably can't see very well because I have rubbed out a lot of it, but I was thinking, what would Santa do? Because logistically speaking, New Zealand is the first place to see the sun. So it would then stand to reason that Santa would firstly go to New Zealand and then work his way across the world. And so I thought, how would it be for Santa? He arrives in New Zealand, which is a stunningly beautiful country, and especially around Christmas time, it's all green and red and beaches and blue sky, and yeah, it's fabulous. And he would jump into the ocean and have a swim before he starts going out on his trek. I just had this idea of Santa running into the water, and yeah, I've got to have my Watercolour tree here and a bit of a beach scene from one of my favourite beaches in Auckland, which is Narrow Neck Beach. I went with a very cartoonistic look to this painting today. I made up the whole thing really. I did use a few references for some of the landscape and also for Santa's pose and the deck chair, but pretty much the rest of it I just kind of made up. The Watercolour tree, I looked at a few references, but I just ended up drawing my own one in the end. The Qor paints worked really well for this. They're very beautiful, they re-wet easily, except for the cobalt violet, but I don't think I used it in this painting. I used a lot of the ochres in this one though, as you can probably imagine. So I haven't really used Arches paper all that much, and it does behave a little bit differently to my usual Canson paper. It's like it's a bit drier or something, and it does take a bit more effort to kind of get the paint to run across the paper, but I know a lot of people love it, and yes, I am aware that it is pronounced Arch, but when I say it, it just sounds so horribly pretentious, so I'm just going to say Arches because that's how we would say it in English, especially in Australia. So as part of our collaboration, we also decided to ask each other 5 questions. And I'm going to answer Miranda's questions as I am painting this. I was going to do it all at the end, but I think I'll just do it throughout the video because we'll be here all day otherwise. So the first question that Miranda asked me is, what initially prompted you to start your YouTube channel? And my answer for that is, I've been watching so many art YouTube channels for many years now, and I just felt like that I could do it as well. I have a lot of art supplies, I enjoy getting new art supplies, and I also really love talking about art. It's one of the few times I actually do get to talk about it because most people that I know have zero interest in it, or, you know, it's just not their thing. So yeah, this is kind of my outlet to talk about my most favourite subject currently, which is a hut. It did take me quite a long time to pluck up the courage to start a YouTube channel, and I'm really glad I did this year, I can tell you, because what a year it's been, and this has kept me sane. So in the background there you see I painted in a funny shaped island, and it's actually a dormant volcano called Rangitoto, and you can see it so well from Narrow Neck Beach. It's one of my most iconic memories is Rangitoto Island, and I've climbed it a couple of times all the way to the top. There's a lookout up there. It takes a few hours and it's pretty hard going, but the whole thing can be done in a day, so that's pretty nice. And you can see I started painting Santa's skin. He is blending in so much with the background, and I really wanted to outline him, but at the same time I just did not want to use pen outlines in this video, so you'll see a bit later that I just keep fiddling with it, but I'm just basically going over the whole thing now with a single layer, and then later on I can build those layers and shadows, etc. But I find it easier to paint the whole thing out first so I can really see the picture, and then I can add the details in after. That's just the way I work. I know some other people like to work on one area at a time. Yes, and Santa's got candy cane coloured swimming trunks. I thought about putting him in budgie smugglers. If you don't know what that is, look it up. It's a very iconic Aussie thing. But we're in New Zealand, and I thought he would wear more like a boy short than a brief. And as you can see, he's just flinging off his Santa suit all over the beach. That's just what I was picturing in my head. He'd get there, he'd find it's hot, so he just flings everything off and, yeah, runs into the water. And sitting in the deck chair, I've put a little kiwi, just kind of a self-insert here. the kiwi is just hanging out. They don't hang out on beaches normally, but hey, it's my picture, it doesn't really matter. I just thought it would be a little bit of fun. I was going to paint all of the things with red, but then I just thought it would be a bit more fun to change up some of the colours. So the towel is green, we've got the chili bin there, which is in a nice blue, and then I'm just adding in the details of Santa's belt and a beer bottle in the sand there. Oh, and of course, he's not going to wear big black boots on the beach. No, he's got to wear jandals. That's what we call them in New Zealand. In Australia, they're called thongs, much to the amusement of Americans, and otherwise they're generally just called flip-flops. But in New Zealand, they're always and will forever be jandals. The second question that Miranda asked me, she said, "On your channel, you play with a lot of different art supplies, which I absolutely love to watch. Which art supply would you consider to be your favourite, and which is your second favourite art supply?" That's a hard one. I do change my mind quite a lot, but I think overall my favourite art supply is watercolour. I'm not going to say one particular brand because I do change my mind on that as well, but yeah, just watercolour painting in general really makes me happy. It's fun. It's not what I'd call easy, but it's kind of fast, if you know what I mean. And I really enjoyed painting this picture because it was pretty much all watercolours, and yeah, it definitely makes me happy. My second favourite art supply, probably coloured pencils. I'm not too sure if I prefer watercolour pencils or oil and wax-based pencils, but I do tend to do that a lot as well, so I'm going to put coloured pencils in as my second favourite for now, although a few other contenders would be inks, because I also really like them, and I also had quite a lot of fun using some oil pastels this year, but I wasn't very good at it, so we'll just let that one sit on the back burner for now, because I definitely need more practice with those. Here in the painting you can see I've started on the Pohutukawa tree. I really did just make this up, but I do remember how the blossoms look. They are these beautiful red flowers, like a bottle brush almost, that sort of style, and they're very hardy, so they do live easily along the seaside. What you can't see in the foreground is this tree is actually on grass and then it goes down into the sand. But I just spent a lot of time adding red and green because I wanted my tree to look really Christmassy, and they really do look that red when they are blooming. They're so lovely. I do miss them a lot. Question 3. What is your least favourite art supply and why? This one's also quite hard. I think for the moment I'm not a huge fan of charcoal sticks. I really want to be better with them, but I find them very frustrating. I don't like the mess that they make. I hate smudging it all over my hands, and I know a lot of people love that, but it just annoys me intensely because I'll usually get smudges in places where they don't need to be. So it's more just a fact that I haven't used them that much, and I think I would like to actually try using charcoal a bit more just so I can get better at it. But for now, it's probably my least favourite art supply, unless you count things that are just really cheap and nasty, like those felt pens I used in that turtle drawing. Oh my goodness, I was so mad the whole time I did that. So yeah, I could say my other least favourite art supply is anything that doesn't work how you want it to be, you know, just because it's so bad quality or anything like that. And it doesn't always have to be cheap. Some expensive art supplies can be surprisingly disappointing. And going straight into question 4, what subject do you find the most difficult to paint and why do you think that is? And I'm going to say that I find trees really difficult. As you can see, I'm working on this one. It does look a bit funny. Granted, I wasn't going off a reference or anything, but I've never been able to get trees to look very realistic. It's something that I've always struggled with, especially tree trunks and things like that. So this tree did not turn out very well in my opinion, but I just kept going. I was having fun doing it, but this is something that I would really like to improve next year and in the future as well. I just want to sit outside and maybe draw some trees from life and just spend more time actually looking at them, because I always draw what I think a tree should look like, but it usually doesn't actually look like that. So that for me is something that I always find very much a challenge, especially painting them. Drawing them may be a little bit easier, but yeah, the painting part, I just can never get them to look very realistic. So that's what I'm going with today. I'm not even getting into people. People, of course, are in their own category of difficulty, but I do find them easier to paint than I find trees for whatever reason. I just think trees are very hard. And since I'm looking at them, number 5, the last question, do you celebrate Christmas and Yuletide? If you celebrate Yuletide, do you get snow there in July? Now, I had to ponder this question for a little while because to me, Christmas and Yuletide were the same thing, but I actually looked it up and realised that they are slightly different. I'd never really thought about it before. Yuletide is to do with the winter solstice on the 21st of December in the Northern Hemisphere, and it goes through until I think the 1st of January. So yes, we do actually have a Yuletide. Our winter solstice is on June the 21st, so that's middle of winter, and it is a very common thing, especially in Australia, to have Christmas in July. And I always wondered why it was in July, because obviously 6 months out from Christmas is the 25th of June. But no, this would be why it's Yuletide and not Christmas, because the Yuletide would then fall around about the 2nd of July. So thank you, Miranda, for asking me that question, because that was something I never knew, why people celebrated Christmas in July. Now, it does snow in some parts of Australia, not far from where I live in the alpine regions, but really it does not snow in the more urban parts of Victoria. Occasionally you might get a bit of sleet and a bit of hail, but it only lasts for a brief while, and not like I see in America where you get these huge snowdrifts. It also snows in New Zealand, but once again in the alpine regions, people tend to do Christmas in July in order to eat traditional hot Christmas dinners. But in summer Christmas, you have barbecues, we'll have things like ham and roast turkey and things like that, but quite often we'll have it cold, so more like picnic style spread. Some people cook full roast meals, but I just think it's crazy, especially on Christmases where the weather is really hot, and in Australia it can get very, very hot. The hottest we've had, I think, was 36 degrees Celsius, which, I don't know, is pushing 100 degrees or 90 something degrees Fahrenheit, something in there. And yeah, it was pretty brutal. So most of the time, salads and barbecue meats are far more preferable to really heavy, stodgy winter food. So yes, we have Christmas in July, or Southern Hemisphere Yuletide if you prefer. What great questions. Thank you for asking me those, Miranda. I hope you've enjoyed the questions that I've asked you. And if you're curious to know which questions I asked Miranda, please do check out her video. I've got it linked in the description below. I spent a lot of this painting going over fine little details, as you can see I'm doing here, making areas darker or lighter, trying to get some more shadows into the sand, but not super dark shadows. I just wanted more of a subtle variation in the sand, because I'm picturing it being a very bright sunny day. Yeah, you would get some dark shadows, but not so much on the sand during the middle of the day. You'd just get more of a subtle shadowing, I think. And I'm just going over his little shorts again. Santa was probably the toughest thing to paint, because he is just blending into the background with his fair skin, as I imagine he would have living in the North Pole. I wanted also to get some more shadow onto the tree trunk, because it was looking pretty one-dimensional, and I just wanted to give it a bit more life and try to make it look more realistic. Oh, I really struggled with it. It's just not my strong point, painting tree trunks. But I just keep trying, and I was determined to have the tree in here. I was just adding a few little shadows. Oh, and I was trying to put the branches inside the tree, which is always, I find, the most challenging part. Just to make it look like there are actually branches and it's not just leaves and flowers floating on top of a tree trunk. That would be a little strange, I think. I did actually end up using a few extra supplies that weren't on our list in this painting. I really needed to add some definition into Santa's body, because I just couldn't see his hands properly or anything like that, so I'm actually going over his skin with some coloured pencils. These are polychromos, and I think I'm using a Caran d'Ache Luminance White, because it is a bit more opaque than the polychromos one. I think the pencil helped so much to render the skin and make it look a lot more realistic almost. I wasn't trying to be realistic with him, but I think it actually turned out alright, and I can really see him a lot better now. Though I still wasn't totally satisfied with it because I was fighting the whole time to not use black pen to outline everything. I really just didn't want to do it, and I did use a little bit of pencil in a few other spots around the drawing, but I did want to keep the paint as the dominant focal point. But I think pencils over the top of watercolour is really fantastic, and I would like to do this a lot more in future paintings because I think the two together work really well. It's like my first favourite medium with my second favourite medium and join them together in harmonious joy. And I did use a little bit of an outline on some of the key parts, which are the clothing and centre. I used, oh, and there's my head, I used a burnt sienna. Then I got a bit of white ink out because his hair needed something. I wanted to keep his hair as white as possible. I added a tiny bit of the Payne's Grey watercolour in with the ink, and that's his beard, or it could be very long underarm hair, whatever you want it to be. And I just went around the white parts of his clothing and added little highlights to the jandals, the chili bin, the chair, into the water. And then I also went over the tree with quite a lot because it just really needed something to bring it up. And I did start making little dash marks with it, but I ended up just dotting it on after a while. And I think the white dots in the foliage makes such a huge difference. It just brings it to life and is reminiscent of tiny spots of light from the sun just reflecting off the flowers and the leaves. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Rangitoto I wasn't very happy with. It was just a bit too flat. I did try to get a bit more depth of shadow at the bottom of it, and then I was just using a pencil to tidy up the sand. But Rangitoto, I'm afraid, never got off the ground, really. And I think the whole thing was actually just a bit too dark. It's a bit too domineering in the painting. I would prefer it if I had left that lighter and spent more time maybe making Santa a bit darker, but never mind. I ended up using an outline in Payne's Grey, I think, to go around Santa in the end because he just needed to stand out more, and that coat and the pants. Just those things I really wanted to be the focal point, and the hat and the jandals. All of the red things, these are the parts that I wanted to be catching the viewer's eye. I don't know how successful I was in it. I just signed it off at the end there. And here it is, Santa's Kiwi Christmas. I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and comment. And thank you so much if you've subscribed or are going to subscribe. I really appreciate it. And also a huge thank you to Miranda for doing this collaboration with me. Please check out her painting. I'm sure she's spent a lot of time on hers as well. And I will see you all again in my next video. Swatch you later. Bye!